Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into building a shed, specifically how to avoid common pitfalls when you're building your first shed.
A great topic.
It is, right.
Mm.
This is actually based on, we found this awesome guide,
Yeah.
and it really resonated with us because I feel like building a shed, it sounds pretty straightforward, right?
You would think so?
You would think so, but there's actually there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
And I think this deep dive is going to be really valuable for anyone out there who is thinking about taking on a shed project for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's just jump right in. The guide uh, highlights 5 key mistakes that people often make when building their first shed. And we're going to go through each of those mistakes and really break down how to avoid them and why they're important to avoid in the first place.
Sounds good.
Okay, so mistake number 1 that this guy talks about is skipping the foundation work.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It seems, I mean, I get it. You're excited. You want to get those walls up. You want to see something,
Right.
tangible. But can you talk a little bit about why that's such a critical mistake to make?
Well, I think the guide really emphasizes that it's all about creating a solid base, a level base for your shed. It's like building a house on sand, right?
Yeah.
You need that strong foundation to support everything else. And even a slight slope in the foundation, which can easily happen if you don't level it properly, can cause a whole host of problems later on.
Like what kind of problems? Give me an example.
Well, for example, you might find that your doors don't close properly or that your walls aren't square. And that can make it really difficult to finish the shed and make it look the way you want it to look.
Okay, so it's not just about, whether or not the shed is going to like immediately collapse.
Right.
It's about the long term, like the integrity of the structure.
Exactly. And it's about the functionality too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, we're convinced we need a level base. What about materials for the base? Does it matter what we use?
It absolutely does. And I think this is where, people might be tempted to cut corners thinking, oh, it's just the base. I can use any old wood I have lying around.
Right.
But the guide really strongly recommends using pressure-treated lumber for any wood that's going to be in contact with the ground.
Okay. And why is that?
Because pressure-treated lumber is specifically designed to resist rot and insects.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to last a lot longer than regular lumber.
Right. So again, spending a little bit more upfront to save us headaches later on.
Exactly.
So we've got a level base. We're using pressure-treated lumber. Anything else we need to consider for the foundation?
Yeah. Before we move on, we really need to talk about building codes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's true.
Because the guide mentions that this is one area where people can really get into trouble if they're not careful.
I can see that. So why are building codes so important when it comes to a shed?
Well, different areas have different regulations, so what might be perfectly fine to build in one area might not be allowed in another.
Right.
And if you don't check the building codes before you start building, you could end up having to tear down your shed and start over or make costly modifications.
Ouch. Yeah.
Which nobody wants to do.
Nobody wants that.
So it's really important to check with your local building department or planning office before you even start digging.
Okay, so how do we even know what to look for? Like, what kind of things do these codes usually cover?
They'll often dictate things like the maximum size you can build without a permit, how far your shed needs to be from property lines, those are called setbacks,
Right.
and even height restrictions. They might even have specific requirements for anchoring your shed, especially in areas with high winds or seismic activity.
Wow. It's really amazing how much goes into it. It's not just about like building a box and calling it a day.
Exactly. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Right. Okay, so we've tackled the foundation. What's the next potential pitfall we need to avoid?
Well, once you've got that solid base, you need to make sure you're building with the right materials. And that's where mistake number 2 comes in
Yeah.
poor material selection.
Okay, yeah. So this is where, some people might try to cut corners and save some money.
Yeah. You might be tempted to use whatever scraps of wood you have lying around or to go for the cheapest option at the lumber yard.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the guide really stresses the importance of using materials that are specifically designed for outdoor use.
Okay. So what's the big deal? I mean, wood is wood, right? Why can't we just use, whatever we have on hand?
Well, because your shed is going to be exposed to the elements, right? Rain, sun, wind, maybe even snow, depending on where you live.
Right.
And indoor materials just aren't designed to withstand those conditions. They'll warp, rot, and deteriorate much faster than exterior grade materials.
So are we talking about like treated lumber again, or are there other, what are we looking for here?
For the walls and roof, they strongly recommend exterior grade plywood. It's durable, weather-resistant, and can handle the wear and tear of outdoor use. And for the framing, remember that pressure-treated lumber we talked about? That's a must for any wood that comes into contact with the ground. But it's also a good idea for the framing, especially the lower portions that are more susceptible to moisture.
Okay, exterior-grade plywood, pressure-treated lumber. Got it. Now, this might seem like a silly question, but even like the nails and screws, does that stuff matter?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people overlook.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you're using fasteners that are designed for outdoor use as well, because regular steel fasteners can rust and corrode, which will weaken the structure of your shed over time.
So we want to go with like galvanized or stainless steel.
Exactly. They'll resist rust and corrosion, so they'll last a lot longer.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. So we've got our foundation, we've got our building materials. What's the next thing we need to think about to make sure we don't mess up our shed?
Well, now that we've got the basic structure down, we need to make sure it can withstand the elements. And that brings us to mistake number 3, inadequate planning for weather.
Ooh, okay. This is where we prevent like, leaks and drafts and all that fun stuff.
Exactly. You don't want to end up with a shed that's leaky, drafty, and basically unusable during bad weather.
No, definitely not.
And it's not just about keeping the rain out. It's about thinking about things like ventilation, weather stripping, and flashing.
Okay, I'm familiar with ventilation and weather stripping, but can you explain flashing? What exactly is that?
Flashing is a thin material, usually metal, that's installed around any openings in your roof or walls, like vents, chimneys, or even skylights. It's designed to direct water away from those openings and prevent it from seeping into your shed.
Just like a little, I don't know, like a little shield.
Yeah, like a little raincoat for your shed's vulnerable spots.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. Okay, so it's not just about having a roof. It's about making sure that every potential entry point for water is sealed up tight.
Exactly. And the guide really emphasizes the importance of getting the roof right in the first place. They talk about the importance of a proper roof pitch, which basically means the angle of the roof.
Okay, so why is the roof pitch so important?
Well, a properly pitched roof allows rainwater and snow to run off easily, preventing it from pooling up and causing leaks. If the pit is too shallow, the water might not drain properly and could eventually seep into your shed.
So it's all about gravity.
Exactly.
Make sure the water has somewhere to go.
Exactly. And then the other thing to consider with the roof is ventilation.
Right?
A well-ventilated shed is crucial for preventing moisture buildup, which can lead to mold, mildew, and that musty smell nobody wants.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure our shed is well ventilated? Is it as simple as just putting in a few vents?
It can be that simple, but there's a bit of a science to it.
Okay.
The key is to create airflow, so you typically want vents near the roof peaks to allow hot, moist air to escape, and vents lower down on the walls to draw in cooler, drier air.
So it's like creating a natural convection system within the shed.
You got it. And this is where the guide really encourages you to think about your specific climate. If you live in a humid area, you might need more ventilation than someone in a drier climate.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got a solid foundation, the right materials, and we're thinking about weatherproofing. What else do we need to consider before we start hammering away?
Before we move on, I think it's worth circling back to building codes for a minute.
Oh yeah, good point. We did touch on that earlier.
Right, but it's really important. And the guide actually lists ignoring building codes as mistake number 4.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to overlook.
It is. It is.
So for those of us who, maybe aren't super familiar with building codes, where do we even begin?
The best place to start is with your local building department or planning office.
Okay.
They can provide you with the specific guidelines for your area.
So there are like national standards.
Yeah.
But then each locality has its own...
Exactly. And sometimes you can even find the information online on your city or county's website.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So what kind of things should we be looking for in these codes?
Well, they'll often specify things like the maximum size shed you can build without a permit,
Okay.
usually based on square footage. So if you're planning on building something on the larger side,
Right.
a permit might be necessary.
Got it.
They'll also have regulations about setbacks,
Setbacks.
which is how far your shed needs to be from property lines.
Oh, okay. Like from the fence or...
Exactly, from fences, from other structures on your property.
Okay.
So it's important to know those setbacks because if you accidentally build your shed too close to the property line,
Right.
you might have to move it,
Oh, no, that would be
which is a huge hassle.
a nightmare.
Yeah, and it could end up costing you a lot of time and money.
Yeah, definitely better to get it right the first time.
Exactly.
So setbacks, Size restrictions, anything else we should be looking for in the building codes?
Yeah. They often have regulations about the height of your shed, too.
Okay.
So some areas might have restrictions on how tall your shed can be, especially if it's close to a neighboring property,
Right, right.
or could obstruct
Makes
views.
sense.
And as we touched on earlier, they might also have specific anchoring requirements,
Oh, right, right.
especially in areas prone to high winds or earthquakes.
Yeah, that's important for safety.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got our building codes, we've got our foundation, we've got our materials, we're thinking about weatherproofing. What's the last mistake we need to avoid to make sure our shed project is a smashing success?
The last mistake might seem obvious, but it's one that can easily trip people up.
No, cards.
Corridor and window planning.
Oh, right. So it's not just about like, throwing a door at a window in there wherever.
Exactly, exactly. And this isn't just about aesthetics, it's about making sure your shed is functional
Right.
and meets your storage needs.
I can see how that could be a problem.
Yeah.
You build this beautiful shed, and then you realize you can't even fit your lawnmower through the door.
Exactly. That's exactly what the guide warns against.
Yeah.
They emphasize the importance of thinking about door size and placement right from the start.
Okay.
Are you going to be storing large equipment in there, like a lawnmower, a snowblower, motorcycles?
Right.
If so, you're going to need a door that's wide enough and tall enough to accommodate those items.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And don't forget about clearance inside the shed.
Oh, right.
Make sure there's enough space to maneuver those items once they're through the door.
So it's not just about the door itself, it's about the whole, flow of movement in and out of the shed.
Exactly, exactly. And then with windows,
Yeah.
obviously windows are great for natural light,
Right.
but you want to think about placement.
Oh.
Do you want to maximize sunlight? If so, south-facing windows are usually a good bet.
Good.
But if you live in a particularly hot climate,
Yeah.
you might want to avoid too much direct sunlight to prevent the shed from overheating.
So it's a balancing act
Exactly.
between light and temperature.
Exactly. And the guide also suggests thinking about ventilation when it comes to windows.
Oh, okay.
If you're planning on using your shed as a workshop or spending a lot of time inside,
Okay.
you want to make sure there's adequate airflow,
Okay.
and windows that open can help with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like thinking holistically about all these elements.
Exactly.
Doors, windows, ventilation.
It all works together.
Yeah.
And it's also about thinking about your future needs, too.
Oh, okay.
Will you be storing larger items down the road? Might you need more workspace?
Right.
Planning for those possibilities now can save you headaches later.
Yeah, I'm seeing a theme here. Careful planning is key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
all about working smarter, not harder.
I like that.
And by avoiding these 5 common mistakes, you'll be well on your way to building a shed that's not only functional and durable, but also a source of pride.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Foundations, materials, weatherproofing, building codes, doors, and windows.
It's like we built a shed together just by talking about it.
I love that. I love that visual. So, this guide has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I've learned so much about what it takes to actually build a shed.
And I think that's the beauty of a deep dive like this.
Yeah.
It allows us to really take a comprehensive look at a topic.
It does. So now I know we've been focused on the practicalities and the
Right.
potential pitfalls, but I want to shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and talk about the fun stuff,
All right. I like fun stuff.
the creative possibilities of shed building,
Yes, let's get creative.
because a shed is so much more than just a storage space.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be a blank canvas for your imagination.
I've seen people transform sheds into amazing spaces like cozy workshops, art studios, mini greenhouses, even home offices.
It's incredible what you can do with a shed. And I think, that's what makes it so exciting. It's a chance to create a space that's truly your own.
Yeah, tailored to your specific needs and interests.
It's making me think about all the different ways people personalize their sheds.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about the functionality. It's about adding those personal touches that make it feel like an extension of your home.
Absolutely. And I've seen people get really creative with paint colors, landscaping, decorative elements like window boxes and trellises. It's
Yeah.
all about making the space feel inviting and reflective of your personal style.
And I imagine, those little touches make the whole building process even more rewarding.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just a construction project, it's a creative expression.
I love that. It's infusing the space with your own personality and making it a place where you truly enjoy spending time.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into shed building, I want to leave our listener with a final thought-provoking question.
Hmm.
So we talked about all the practical stuff, mistakes, the materials, the building codes. But imagine, what would your dream shed look like?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. I think, so often we get bogged down in all the details.
Right.
But yeah, a shed really is a blank canvas.
It is.
You can do so much with it. So what would my dream shed be? I think for me,
Yeah.
I'd love a space with tons of natural light.
Oh, nice.
Maybe a little potting shed, shelves overflowing with plants and seedlings.
Ooh, that sounds lovely.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Or, what about a workshop?
Oh, yeah.
With all the custom tool storage,
Oh.
perfectly organized for all your projects.
I think, honestly, a combination of both would be amazing.
Right.
A place where you can be practical but also creative.
Yeah, yeah.
And get your hands dirty.
And just enjoy the space. It's not just a building, it's an environment.
It is, yeah.
Right. It can enhance your life.
Absolutely.
And then don't even get me started on the outside.
The exterior.
Yeah.
So much potential there.
Like landscaping, maybe a little pathway leading up to the door.
Yeah, or even surrounding it with climbing vines or flowers or something to make it really stand out.
Yeah, make it a little focal point in your yard.
Exactly. Yeah.
Something that's just a conversation starter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think even if you're not ready to build right now,
Yeah.
just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And visualizing, it helps you, get those ideas going.
It does.
So to our listener out there, keep exploring, keep researching, and don't be afraid to think outside the box when it comes to your shed.
Absolutely.
There's no one right way to do it.
No.
It's all about what works for you and your needs.
Exactly. Make it your own. And most importantly, have fun with it.
Yes. Building a shed should be enjoyable from start to finish.
Absolutely. It's a rewarding project.
So dream big, plan carefully, and build with passion. And hey, maybe we even feature your amazing shed on a future deep dive.
That's right. Send us pictures.
Thanks for joining us on this shed building journey. We'll see you next time.
See ya.